Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Triggered AF, the podcast. Listen, this week's episode is going to be a magical one because we are going to be starting a series that we will pepper throughout our episodes called Badass Women in Business. If you know me, you know I love all things, well, not all things, most things business. So we are going to have some really, really dope and dynamic women who have built multi-million-dollar businesses or on their way to building multi-million-dollar businesses to show you that not only can you do it, but this is how they have done it to inspire how you can do it too. Now, we are here with your hosts. We've got Dani.
Hey.
And of course, Alechia. Now, the first person who will kick off this episode, we actually met in our Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. Libby is, super phenomenal. She has taught me so many things, even working from the spa. Sounds crazy, but it is the best type of working to do. Working from the spa to incorporate the type of life you want into the building of your business. So without further ado, Libby is dope. She's going to give you even more information about who she is, what she does, and how she has done it. So here we go. Hey, Libby.
Hi, thank you for that intro. Super excited to be here with you both and talk all things business and entrepreneurship and inspiration.
Love it.
Yeah. So just a quick little background about me. My name is Libby. I'm a clinically trained dietitian. And my story is that after 5 years working in my clinical office, I felt underpaid and underappreciated. So what I did is I looked for ways to make extra money. I started teaching, working overtime, and doing all these types of things. And I ended up working a 60+ hour work week to make just a little bit extra money. And my base pay was $54,000 in Manhattan. I was working in the Bronx. And obviously that's not something I felt I could survive with, right? So I was constantly in that rat race, working more hours and not getting paid well, right? And just really extending myself. And I was frustrated because I'm so passionate about nutrition, love helping people. I just didn't feel valued. I didn't feel valued in the healthcare system. I didn't feel that the patients wanted to see me. There was just a lot of systemic issues with the clinical position in general. So I had to look for other ways to try to create impact and make money. So I just wanted to be able to afford my rent and feel comfortable, but I also wanted to help people. That's truly why I became a dietitian. And so I went on social media to tell my story. I knew I wanted to find other dietitians like me who were doing unconventional things. And to my surprise, I didn't find many. I found a lot of dietitians that were working in clinical like me, but they didn't really have there wasn't a lot of innovation. So I decided to tell my story and talk about my teachings and my aspirations in the field. And I ended up creating a business out of it. And in 3 years, I grew to $1 million business, which is really exciting by showing dietitians how they can become visible using social media, leveraging the power of social media to start their business. And it's called private practice and grow their business, all leveraging the free power of organic marketing via social media.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And the thing that you said is, $1 million in 3 years. For many people, it takes way longer than that. And they can't even imagine that, hey, I can do what I love. I can make impact and I can also, make money. And so many people, they don't know how to tie those things together, and trying to tie them together can be super frustrating because so many want to either, be an entrepreneur or even just, create a profitable side gig, but so many are lost. I mean, I too was one of those many who were lost.
I think I am a part of the many who are lost.
Right now.
Because our audience says with Libby, I'm a health and life coach. And right now, that's like literally the process that I'm in, is trying to kind of fuse all those magical components together that you've now mastered. And it's really difficult. It's one of those things where you learn a lot about yourself in the process. And you realize that there's so many habits and like things that you may have that you really just have to fix and deal. And like, it really is a very transformative process personally. And I think sometimes we get in our own way, just having to go through like the personal, emotional process of trying to fuse those things together, and also trying to figure out the business aspect. It's like
100%. Yeah, it's a very personal journey.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm happy to give some practical, tactical tips today for people who are just starting out, who maybe this feels aspirational, and for those who are already in the game and want to leverage their existing platforms and the ways that they're able to attract clients to get to the next level. So we can definitely go into examples. But to what Alechia had said about 3 years, and there's a lot of misconceptions about that, like overnight success concept. And I just want to like remind the listeners, like I come from a single parent home. I was raised by my mom. I didn't grow up with a whole lot of money, and I've been hustling since I was a kid. So my mom said, if you want something, go get it, go earn it. So ever since I was young, I had a strong work ethic. I have a huge passion and level of empathy to help other people. So sure, my business grew fast because I was able to leverage the power of connection, but I've also had these skills and been working my butt off my whole life. So, I had a business when I was 19. I started a personal training business. I worked at independent gyms, paying them a copay and working with people. And I was able to do that throughout college for 9 years. I was able to teach group fitness classes and personal training. So I had that business on the side. And even before that, I worked in high school. And before that, I was a nanny in middle school. So when people hear about my business growth, I just want to keep in mind and that this is who I am, right? So I've been working hard my entire life, and I teach tactical steps of how to do that, because we all have different journeys and different backgrounds. But like, it's in my DNA to work. It's in my DNA to serve. It's who I am, and it's how I feel fulfilled. So for people who have different visions of how they want that to look in their lives, I think the first step is just to reflect with, what do you want? Do you want this to be a side thing? How big do you want it to be? And there's nothing that goes without work. So it can be focused, it can be strategic, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, what I've done does take work. It takes discipline. It takes focus. And it's something that I've been doing my entire life.
Ooh, I love that. I love the fact that you said it takes discipline and it takes work, because so many, and I won't say all because that's a generalization, but too many, they really do want to, get it for nothing. And I am a firm believer in, manifesting and visualizing. And I do that literally before I, approach or launch out any new thing. I always walk through like manifestation and visualization, but then I get up and do something about what I'm envisioning. But what would you say, because you said this is in your DNA, this is who you've been. You literally have been working since middle school, nannying, which is a huge level of responsibility, because someone is trusting you with their kid. Like, you can't, copy paste and have another one of those if anything happens. So what would you say is the one thing that you wish that you knew about yourself before getting started in business?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it makes me think, right? What's the top thing? Because there are so many.
Yeah.
I think that being individual and being who I am and being okay with being different is something to embrace. And that's a big part of what I represent. And I help our clients, like I call it niching down, focusing their message. Individuality is a huge component of who I am and what I represent in my company and part of my core values. And I think that, as a woman and as an ambitious woman, I was always told to, step back, do less, sit in my office. And it really, even though throughout my life, I had this entrepreneurial spirit, it did make me feel insecure constantly from many directions, societal and people been told to be smaller than who I am and what I want. And so to be able to break through that, and just say, this is who I am. Like, I'm an ambitious, driven, aggressive woman, and I'm okay with that.
Ooh, yes.
Yes.
And the beautiful part is that, I have a husband who loves that and embraces that about me. I have friends who are inspired by that, and I have clients who aspire to transform into some element of that. So really stepping into my identity and accepting that I want more, and that's okay. Me become more visible, and that also helps my clients and my audience know that becoming more visible is it's good. It's a good thing, and it ultimately helps your clients. If you want to create more impact, and stepping into individual self is important.
Ooh,
yeah.
Yeah, that was so good. Like, we're both like, wow.
I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It does. But for so many, especially women, whether you are a woman of color, but even especially if you're a woman of color, like my mother told me, and I love her to pieces, that this is not a, trash my mom, like she's a leader of my tribe. But she told me, like, you do too much. You need to calm down. You make too much noise. You stir too many pots. You're too much. And for a lot of women, that is the constant thing that we're told.
Yeah.
Like, from the nasty women comment to the, that's not ladylike. And I can't stand the term ladylike.
Yeah.
But we're told, like, hey, you're too much, you're too aggressive. And if you're this way, A, you won't ever find love. B, no man wants that. So they're going to, leave you, or they won't stay, or they'll do all these things that are whatever, that aren't positive to you. And it's like, when do we get to the point that we say, I'm going to do what works for me. And then whoever is a part of my tribe will come and stay. And who is not a part of my tribe, who doesn't allow me the autonomy to be exactly who I am, they'll come and leave. And I'll say thank you to the both of them.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you understand, or you even said, Libby, that you stepping into your fullness and just accepting yourself makes you a better businesswoman. Like, it makes you better for your clients. It just, I'm sure it makes you a better partner in your marriage. Like, it just overall improves the quality of your life, because there's so many, I'm sure, internal struggles that you probably don't have to deal with, that maybe the average woman is still dealing with. I know many of us, like Alechia said, we all are not all of us, but most of us are raised to kind of shrink, especially in the workplace, because that's like how we we don't want to be bitchy, because you use the word aggressive, which we know translates to bitchy in in workplace talk. It's like, if she's aggressive, it's like, no, you're not an aggressive woman, you're a bitchy woman. And I love to just hear that reframed. And it's like, no, you can be aggressive, you can be ambitious, you can be driven, you can know what you want, you can say what you want without it being bitchy. Like, I don't understand why, when we're like that, when women are like that, it's bitchy. When men are like that, he's like a go-getter.
Yeah, it's true. And you mentioned in the workplace, and it's absolutely true in the workplace. It's true in academia. It's true in friends. It's true in relationships. It's true in every single aspect. Because I know you mentioned personal growth, excuse me, earlier. And so it's personal growth and business, and how they're so intertwined.
Yeah.
And then to Alecia's point, it's beautiful to step into yourself and your individuality. And it also takes a group of like-minded people. And it really takes a tribe to be able to do that, because it can feel lonely when you go on the path that's the road less traveled, right? And so I think that's why it took me a longer time. I wish that everyone says that, every entrepreneur says, I wish that I did this earlier, right? And so
Yes.
I teach our clients to skip clinical and to leave clinical and to start when they're a student. I tell dietitians, there's no reason why you can't teach nutrition as a student, right? And you don't need to wait until you're 5, 10, 20 years disgruntled in the field. You don't need to wait that long to live your best life, feel aligned, make money, and impact more people, right? And so it's true for me too. If I were to have had the support and be more aligned, I'm 34 now. If I would have done this when I was 21, my life would have been a lot different. And so I love being able to share with the younger generation, that whether it's a side hustle, whether they aspire to have $1 million business, six-figure, multi-million, there's no reason why they can't create something when they're young. They don't have to wait to carve their identity. And if they change it, that's okay. That's part of the process. Just to go down that path and be with like-minded people who support alternative ways of thinking, such as powerful, strong, and ambitious women, is important. And so that we can support other women. And I still feel like that's not, that term is thrown around a lot, women helping women, but it's women helping young women helping those who identify as a woman. And I think it's really important to have that a universal term. So all types of people who identify as a woman can feel accepted. And it's something we're still working on a lot. We need a lot more communities, a lot more players in the game to represent that.
A lot more cross-cultural helping as well. Like I know we had this conversation, Alechia, the sticky friendships one, where we had this episode about how, like most people are friends with people within their same ethnic group. A lot of people don't really crisscross. And I know in business, it's a similar experience where like this group of people will come together and work together. This group of people will come together. I definitely think we all have so much to offer across cultural and color lines.
Absolutely.
When it comes to everything, but especially business, because for women of color, it's a much newer foray for us. Like it's a much newer endeavor. So we have a lot of things we can learn from people that are more experienced and may have had other family members that have been in business for generations. Like there's so many things that we kind of get the short end of the stick. So we're kind of like figuring it out when there's so many women in other cultures that have already figured it out, and their moms did it and their grandmas did it. And for us, it's, so I definitely love the idea of kind of crossing those lines and fusing together. And if we say we're going to come together and work, it also includes kind of giving some of those secrets and tips and helping. So that's why I think it's so awesome that you even came on here, because there's a whole other audience that would love to hear some of these things that we honestly just wouldn't hear otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's so much value because you don't know what you don't know. You can read a book all day long, which is why I love the whole, I get that you want to go to clinicals, but there's real life that's right outside that you can start. I too don't believe in that. I had my daughter start her first business. I want to say she was 7, maybe 5. I don't remember. It's a long time ago. But yeah, I had her start her first business, and in her first week, she made $1,000. It wasn't about the amount of money. She could have made $50 and I would have been happy. For me, it was about, I want to show you that you are a creator, because that is a concept that I didn't honestly completely understand until I was 26, getting divorced, trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? But to show young women of all ethnicities, whether you are Indian, Pacific Islander, white, Black, Latinx, whatever you are, that you can create and build no matter what age or stage you're in. And again, she doesn't have that business anymore. She probably doesn't even remember what the business was. But all that mattered is that she can duplicate it and do it again. She just started another business the other day. It made $30 her first day. And for her, that was just so great because she's trying things out, figure it out. I feel like as women, we have got to be okay with figuring it out. Everybody is like, no, you got to have it together. You've got to do this. You've got to do this. No, you got to try. Just try some stuff.
Yeah.
Just try some stuff.
Yeah. And I have a question, Libby, about what you said in reference to when you have people that are still students and they haven't done their clinicals and they may not feel like they can start teaching. What do you say to them when they maybe don't feel qualified enough? Because I know that's something in my personal life I tend to struggle with, where like, I don't feel like I've done enough, or I don't have this title or that title or this schooling or this education. So sometimes the lack of feeling qualified or validated by whoever can make people feel like they're not ready to kind of put themselves out there to teach or help anybody. So what do you kind of say to that? Because I know that's a big one, I'm sure, especially for your students.
Yeah, it's huge. So I hear PhDs and doctors say they're not qualified enough.
What?
Okay. Yeah, and I think that it's a really interesting concept. So I'm very, very big on wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just get started. Alicia's 7-year-old daughter did it. And I doubt she has the type of education, being a 7-year-old, she hasn't finished she hasn't had a chance to finish her schooling, right? So we get into this trap, this cycle of thinking that we need more and more and more certs, more and more and more education, and all we need to do is have a little bit more experience, compassion, or education a little bit more than the person we're helping. A couple steps ahead is really all we're looking for, all that other people are looking for. So I think that that's often used as an excuse for people to not do the work. And it is a confidence area. But if you can learn how to connect with somebody, as simple as employing empathy and asking them open-ended questions and sitting and holding space with them, you'll find that you're more than qualified to help them. And it's really doing that internal work and allowing yourself to be an expert. And an expert, what does that mean? It means that you're a couple steps ahead in some way from the person that you're helping.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's how I overcame it, was just doing it. That's the only way, is just to like do it. And then, you'll come to realize that the information that is actually like a lot of people don't know that. Like, especially if you have like a niche or something that you're like specializing in, you're going to find that you're part of a very small population. Like, like sometimes like I'll say something about food, and to me, it seems so common. I feel like everyone knows. And then they're like, what? Really? I had no idea. I didn't know sugar had all these different names. And I'm like, really? I thought you would know. Like, you think that? And that's not the case. And I learned that. And that's how I overcame my qualification complex, is just realizing and having those conversations and connecting with people. And when you connect with people, honestly, they don't care what your titles and your qualifications are. And that for me was so eye-opening, was when I was having conversations, nobody asked me what school, what degree I had. People don't really care if you're providing value. Would you agree with that, Libby? That's
fully. And I wrote that down, qualification complex. So
I did too. I was afraid you guys could see me writing it. I was like, ooh, that is
the amount of people that have asked me my business background might be like one or two.
Yeah.
My only formal business education is where I met Alechia and our scholarship, 10,000 Small Businesses. So, I mean, I'm clinically trained. I have a background in clinical nutrition, right? So that's a science, master's in science, and my undergrad's in nutrition as well. So I never took a formal course. So when I first started, I started by connecting with dietitians and just truly employing that empathy about how we want to help people. And I was very unfocused. I talked about a lot of different nutrition education topics because that's what I felt comfortable with on social media. And then from there, took small baby steps. I was one step ahead of a dietitian somewhere else who hadn't shown her face. Not that I was necessarily any smarter, didn't have more experience, had a few years of clinical under my belt, but I just had the courage to go out there and do it. And then that inspired dietitians who said, gosh, I've been in my rusty office for 10 years and nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows my name. Nobody's heard my voice. Nobody connects with me, right? I wanted to be able to share that story. And so I think it's really just one step. And so for me, it was the connection. And then it was one step forward more. And then I charged a really low rate until I got another client and then another client. And then I charged more. And then it grew and then it grew more. So it really was just starting with connection. And I personally, I think it's important to reflect and think, what are you attracted to? I'm not attracted to necessarily an expert. I'm attracted to somebody who can tell a story, who can understand me, who can appreciate me. They don't necessarily have to have the same revenue that I have for me to connect with them, depending on what that is. For example, I've hired coaches that don't necessarily make as much money as I do, but they might have other aspects and elements of success. They're dedicated to some aspect. They've been able to make more connections, and they have written books and done other things that I aspire to do. And for me, they might be intimidated because I've made more money, but they've done other things and I've been able to connect with that. So I think oftentimes we just, we tell ourselves this story. And if we could just remove those barriers and overcome the qualification complex and take action, and then those baby steps, those small baby steps can turn into something bigger, whether you are quantifying that in terms of dollar amount or clients or even stories, and the amount of DMs and PMs you get from people saying like, thank you for making me feel seen and heard. And that's pretty rewarding to get those kinds of messages from your ability to just go out there and connect with people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you just said is it all starts with connection. That has been honestly how I've built every one of my businesses. It is about connection. Too many times people think that they're dealing with a business, and it's like, no, you are dealing with a person. You're dealing with a person. I don't care how tall the building or how big the conference rooms. There are people that occupy the spaces. And if you want to build with the people that occupy those spaces, you're going to have to do things differently. It is just what it is. You have to figure out, how do I connect with people? And I get it, as an introvert, it can be tough. Like Libby, even, and people, they don't believe me, which, can get frustrating. But I am an introvert. And so sometimes being out or being front facing, or as Libby says, showing my face, can be energy exhausting for me. But I will say, even using Libby's super simple, hey, show your face, tell your story more, allow people to connect and feel connected to you. I secured clients from simply doing that in my Instagram stories. Like, it's literally that simple, that effective. And now I'm working on staying consistent. But it's just that simple. But
I think, I love seeing you do that more, Alechia, because I feel like that is something that I've always wanted to see more from you, and I'm just your friend, but I'm also a fan, right? I'm also your audience. And I love seeing you do it. And it also inspires me, just like how Libby was like, hey, I started telling my story, and other dietitians were like, hey, I have a story. Hey, I want to get from behind this desk too. It's a domino effect. And sometimes we forget that we're so focused on the judgment of the naysayers or the people that may have something to say, and our family members that may criticize us. And we forget about the like a lot more people are actually super interested in what you have to say, and you'll inspire them. So just so you know, you're inspiring me to want to start talking more and doing more and showing more. Yeah. And showing more of my because it's all about vulnerability, right? Like like what we all are attracted to in some way. Like we love, that's why reality shows are so popular. We just love to see people. We just like to see people just do their lives. Like it's something fascinating. And I think the most endearing thing about reality shows is the fact that you just get to see people be raw and uncomfortable and awkward, and it feels like it's naturally happening. And I know sometimes it's scripted. I'm not fooled. I know that a lot of it, but there are really, sometimes you can tell. And I think that's where the people that really rise to the top in reality TV, like your Nene Leakes, and you can tell that sometimes they have really raw, unplanned reactions and emotions. And those are the reality stars that we even connect with the most, the ones that just seem to be not holding back as much as they probably should, right? And we're like, oh my God, did she just say that on TV in front of everyone? So I think it's really just all coming, like what Brene Brown talks about, is just that really focusing and using your vulnerability to propel you forward. It makes such a difference. So for sure, Alechia, keep doing it, because I love to see it. I listen to all your stories. So sometimes you think no one cares, but you're impacting more than you realize. And that's for everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Libby, for that one.
Well, I appreciate that, but all the credit goes to you, really, because you're taking action. And I absolutely love your story. I love every time you talk about your background and why you do what you do, Alechia. Danielle, I'm just getting to know you more, but from what I do know of Alechia, I told Alechia, like, it's a disservice if you don't constantly tell your story online, because people want to hear you and want to see you, and to hear Danielle validate that and say, I love when you show up. That's proof of how important.
Yeah.
And sure, the tactical of like how often and this and that, we can all adapt that a little bit to your tolerability in life and all the things that come up, but at least finding some way to be consistent is going to help tremendously. It not only holds you accountable, but it also like inspires your audience, and it's definitely, it works. And I love the parallel between reality shows. I didn't even think of that, and getting all kinds of nuggets from our conversation. But it's really true. I mean, no matter what the personality is, we can have the most absurd person and like just appreciate them, because you're like, you are just, sure, it might be scripted, I get that, but details aside, you're like, there's some version in there of you that's just who you are, and that's beautiful. Yeah. And that's really just, we're all dying to be who we are, right? And to have our identities seen, heard, and accepted.
Yes.
I think that, it's a tricky, slippery conversation, because not everyone's going to accept us, but finding our tribe and the people who do, whether they're friends, connections, clients, referral network, family, like that's what's important, is finding some way to be among people who appreciate you, even if they're not going to buy from you, but they're just going to continue to support you. And I think that's what this is fundamentally about, is you get closer to finding that support system when you let people know who you are by showing up regularly for yourself and for them. And it works. It works every time, no matter what your personality is. It doesn't matter if you're introverted, extroverted, if you're uncouth, it doesn't matter. You just got to be you. And somebody out there is going to say, like, I wish I had that courage. I wish I was like them.
Yeah. You just dropped some nuggets there. And I remind myself and tell people all the time, regardless of how people feel about her, I have a tremendous respect for Kim Kardashian with what she's been able to build, parlaying an unfortunate, release of her tape into a multi-billion-dollar empire for her and her family, literally off of being who they were, functioning, dysfunctioning, working out, not working out, cussing each other out. Is it, I guess, the PC way to do things? No, it's not. It's not always the PC way. The conversations that they have, the whole 9 yards, it truly does boil down to, hey, this is who I am. Take it, like it, love it, leave it. This is what it is.
Love it.
Yeah. Period.
Great example. I mean, it's an extreme example, but it's a great example.
Yes. And that's what it is. It is an extreme example, because imagine who you get to deliver an impact by being who you are. The messy, the not put together. And that for me is a huge challenge, because again, I come, from a background where you don't let people see your skirt hanging. You got to make sure that everything on the outside is perfect and in order. And, there's nothing that's messed up, and nobody knows what's happening on the inside. Like, that's where I come from. So it has been a real reckoning to constantly go back and say, hey, the only person who's expecting perfection right now is you. And if this desire for perfection is prohibiting you from growth, you're going to need to make some changes. And so that's a lot of internal change. So how do you handle the internal changes that occur when you are growing professionally? Because you started out with humble beginnings, and then to go from humble beginnings to so quickly, building $1 million business. Too many people believe more money, more problems. And I just don't want to subscribe to that. So how do you handle all those internal changes that happen with your professional growth?
Yeah, great question. So first I want to define what those internal changes are, just for some context. And then also I believe, Danielle, you mentioned this earlier, that part of your journey, or part of the journey in general, is getting to know who you are personally and growing personally and professionally. And I couldn't agree with that anymore, right? So the more that you grow in business in terms of revenue, profit margins, clientele, the more you're going to learn about yourself. So as I've grown my team, I went from working from myself to I've got a staff of 8, I've learned a lot of lessons about communication. I feel like my personality is amplified in the growth of my business, right? I learned more about what I already knew about myself, what I already knew to be true. So I think some of those, what did you call them? Alechia, you called them
internal changes.
Internal changes. How would you define an internal change? Would you call that like your personality profile? Is that what you mean by internal change?
So, I mean, there can sometimes be anxiety that comes with growth. So whether it's anxiety, whether it's, a belief in yourself, because it is different managing, a bank account of 25,000 versus a bank account of, 750,000.
Yep.
Those are different. Those are very, very different. Tax brackets are different. The people you hire have to be different. So those type of internal changes, like even accepting that some people won't come along for the ride or stay on the ride because it makes them uncomfortable too, or scares them a bit.
Yeah, I think that, those are all really, really heavy. So in terms of my relationship, an internal change would be being the breadwinner, and talking through all that. An internal change would be my support system, so my friends and who I choose to spend my time with. And then it would be networking. And so for purpose of this conversation, I'll probably go in a little bit more about the networking and the friends, although I'm happy to talk about my husband as well. He's very progressive and amazing. I've talked to Alechia about this before. He's really supportive, but like it's as a woman and it's challenging, right? To be a millionaire there's only 3% of millionaires are women, according to statistics. So it's lonely. So as I grow in terms of impact and revenue, I find it more challenging to find people in a connection business networking realm because there are fewer people. So I'm part of a bunch of organizations that are 90% men, 90% older men, and they're great and they're mentors and they're peers and they support one another. But it's harder to find people who are somewhat in my realm of life, looking to grow a family, create impact, use modern ways to communicate. Like I grew my business through Instagram, through social media marketing. And so a lot of people I meet, that's like not as common for some of the people I connect with. They might have built their business through referrals or before the internet was created and all types of other means of creating a business. So I find it harder to network. So the personal growth that I would say one of the internal cues, changes, things to master is dealing with getting really clear with what is the best way to position my time and network, and how do I define those people, and how do I accept that it's a lonely journey, because it is harder to find people. It's harder to find friends that understand, and it all goes back to what we said at the top of this conversation. Even though I constantly tell myself, and I've got therapy network, I'm in 2 organizations, I'm on committee for both of them. So I give back to student entrepreneurs. I help connect millionaire women together. So I do what I can to lead leaders. I constantly make efforts, but it's still a really small pool, like really, really small. So I'm just constantly looking and growing, and people are still, even more than ever, saying to me like, why aren't you just like, why isn't this enough? Like you're in these groups, so they're constantly trying to make me smaller. Remember, it goes back full circle from the beginning.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of my clinical office. Why don't you just sit in your room and look pretty? That's what my administrator said to me. Just sit in your room and look pretty. And I'm like,
look pretty.
Yeah, just sit down and look pretty, Libby. What's the problem, right? And it's common, those types of things. Why can't you be smaller? I remember my boyfriend in high school said, "Why do you do so much, Libby? Why do you do so much?" And I'll never forget that conversation. And I only did like 3 things, but like it's who I am, right? Like I'm and I just I love to I'm a big person. Like I love to do big things, right? I love to travel. I love to have deep philosophical conversations. I will create until I die. I like to create art, create businesses, create conversations. And so I find as I create a larger body of work, it can be more and more lonely, and I have to more strategically find the people and the crew that I want to align myself with. And I'm fortunate to have had met Alechia. And part of the reason I did the and you did now, Danielle, and part of the reason I did the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Scholarship is because that was one of my efforts to try to meet and connect with people. And so I'm constantly doing that. And I have to admit, it's not easy. It's a lot of work. And it will continue to be a lot of work. And I know there's strategy involved, but I think finding your tribe and then sitting back and constantly telling yourself, like, this is who I am. Not everybody's going to agree with me. It's true at the beginning, and it's actually even more true as you progress. And so I've seen those same threads show up in different forms and different conversations. Libby, why don't you just have a kid? Libby, why don't you just do this and that, right? So people constantly trying to make me do something different, trying to make me smaller. And it all goes back to what I've been told my entire life. So I just have to sit and reflect with that and process it and just tell myself, what is my vision and purpose? Why am I here? Who supports me? And then I align with those people, and then I, drown out the noise from the others. And I think if you want to be an influential, impactful person, it starts with defining what that looks like, even if it's small. And then you have to constantly remind yourself that not everybody's going to agree. And people sometimes are not going to accept success, even maybe your friends, your family. They might try to make you smaller. And it's important that you're aware of that. And then you can kind of put it in the corner to the left and then just keep going and just find your people. And it's challenging, but without doing that practice, I don't think that you can be as impactful and as influential and live up to your full purpose and potential. And I want to live up to my full potential. I want to create a lot of impact. So I will constantly need to be telling myself that these things I'm hearing are stories. And I have to quickly differentiate when someone is a naysayer or when someone's going to be on my side. And even if I have fewer amount of people on my side, I was just constantly looking for those people and dismissing the rest.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's something. So I always say, I don't want to come back, right? So if for people who may believe in like your soul reincarnating, and if you feel like you've lived multiple lives and things like that, everyone, what Libby just said is how you don't come back. If you just want to transcend this earthly realm, walking in your purpose and figuring out why you're here and living up to your fullest potential, walking and stepping into your highest self. Like, I know we're talking about business, but I think everything has a spiritual component to it. We are,
absolutely,
like, that's just the reality of things. And when she said that, I'm just like, that is the answer. And I always say, like, look, I'm not trying to come back. I don't want to learn this lesson anymore. I don't want to reincarnate and come back and deal with this person, deal with this issue. Yeah. And it's so important to figure out what our purpose is. And I think sometimes that's where we get a little discouraged, where people will say, "Oh, I feel lost. I feel like I don't know what to do with myself. I feel stuck," especially is a big, big one. Especially as people get older, you start to feel stuck. You start to feel stagnant. You're like, okay, what am I really here for? And you just summed up exactly, like, the main thing, and probably the first thing is to figure out, okay, what are you here to do? What's your purpose? And then how can I start taking the steps to align to that purpose and find the thing that I love to do and, hopefully make some money from doing it and figure out what success looks like to me. Because that's also a thing that will come up a lot. And I'm sure as you've gone to different levels, what success looks like to you, I'm sure has changed over time. And then you have people that are trying to define success for you. It starts to get really frustrating, and the last thing that I want to say is I love how you talk about how, even though back, like you talked about in high school, how someone was trying to make you small. And it's crazy that at every level, people try to make you small. Like, it doesn't end. And that just speaks to what growth is and what the journey is all about. Like, there is no end in sight. Like, you're going to constantly face new, like, what do they say, Alechia? It's like new demons at new levels, or every level has a new
devil.
Yeah, every level has a new devil. And I think that's so important for people to realize, because I think people think once they reach a certain space that all that ends, and all of a sudden everyone's accepting and everyone loves you and everyone wants you to be great. And that's not true. As a matter of fact, it probably gets more difficult the more you go. Would you say that it gets like it is still a thing?
Yeah. I use the word lonely. So yes, you summed it up perfectly. Every level is a new devil. I feel like I need to take notes on this podcast. It's like so awesome. I'm like, let me look at my notepad. Let's see. conversation complex. All right, so that was very well summed up, Danielle. Yeah, I would say that I almost look at it now. I always try to reframe, right? So a growth oriented mindset, I see something, I shift it to positive, right? I'm all about growth and not everybody else's, right? So that's the point of this conversation, is to identify those who are. So what I would say is, now I look at these situations like my boyfriend in high school who said, like, wait, what? Right? I look at those situations where people, they might not mean it, but they say, like, why do you want more? Why are you doing this? And I almost take those as markers of success. So the more people that say things like that, where I used to be so upset, right, at my administrator who said, sit in your office and look pretty, right, which is demeaning. Those used to crush me when my mindset wasn't as strong. But now I see those conversations, those words, those looks, right? You know what I'm talking about. You know, look. So however you can, however you feel it in your gut, I take those opportunities as measures of, I'm getting to the next level. Like, I'm actually.
I like that. How did you do that? Like, how did you change your mindset?
So I want to give some practical tips. That's a great question. I read a lot, just like Alechia. I know the first time Alechia and I hung out, she pulled out like, oh, I'm reading this book. And I was so impressed. I was like, wow, Alechia, you are like awesome, right? Like, doing the work, right? So firstly, I do read a lot. One of my favorite books about mindset is called Mindset by Carol Dweck, a PhD, easy to remember, right? It's called Mindset. I read a lot of books. I watch YouTube videos. I look up people role models. I think it's really important to have role models who've done important, impressive things. Sarah Blakely is one of mine. She created Space, and she's part of the Giving Pledge. So she's giving back. I think it's half or something, don't quote me on that, of her money to philanthropy. And to me, that's a very aspirational thing to say, the money I'm giving is going to help give back into the world. And so I look at people that are part of the Giving Pledge, and they're mostly men, just because statistically speaking, less women make as much money as men, right? I said, like, millionaires, 3% are women. I look at the women of the Giving Pledge. I believe there's less than 5, but I'll have to go back and look again at the list. And I want to know, who are they? What do they do? How have they contributed and become that bigger version of themselves to live beyond them and create that legacy? And I read their books, and I read their poems, and I look at their social media. And my grandfather always used to say, if you want to be successful, just read someone's biography who's successful. And it sounds so simple, but it's true. So I follow people that inspire me, and it doesn't have to be someone as big as Sarah Blakely, right? So I mean, let's be real. Like, there's a few people in that league, but I like to look at a lot of different types of people, whether they're someone I know and I aspire to be in some aspect, or whether they're already giving back in some large way. And I just learn from them, and I read about them. So I think the books, podcasts, consuming media, having role models, and then I have practices. So to go for full circle, Alechia at the beginning mentioned, like, doing work at the spa. It's really important to me to take a step back and practice self-care very regularly. So I go to the spa, like, no joke, like at least twice a week. I have a membership. So I'm at the spa.
Yes, I love that.
After this episode, I'm going to go to an art class because I draw. I ride horses. Like, I have a lot of hobbies. I work out, like I do things. And I think it's really important. I love massages and spas. Okay. So, like, hot stone bed any day of the week. So being able to give myself that opportunity to be super plugged in and then super unplugged helps me cultivate that mindset.
Ooh, yeah, I love that. But I feel like people always feel like they don't have time, but you
require it.
So, and again, self-care can be 1-minute meditation using Headspace. And I know there's free opportunities. So it can be writing down in your journal every day. It can be writing something before or you go to bed or when you wake up. So self-care can be quick and it can be free. It's just a practice you need to embed. And then at different levels, like, I didn't used to go to the spa twice a week when I was in my clinical job, right? Like, I didn't think I deserved that. So I had to, I took the level there, and then and then I increased it over time. So I think you just need to look at where you're at now and realize that self-care doesn't have to be fancy or luxurious. It just needs to be about you and giving yourself space. It can be meditating on your couch, and that totally. So to give
it doesn't have to be expensive either. I wanted to just put that in there because a lot of people have told me, like, oh, well, you're privileged. You make a lot of money. You can do da-da-da-da. And I'm like, first of all, I need you to understand revenue, expenses. Revenue is not what I get to utilize. So mind the business, number one. But number two, there are so many free or free-ish things you can do. Plan a park picnic for yourself.
Yeah.
If you live in, metro cities, when you go downtown, you can literally plan where you go and visit a lot of the statues. And if you don't like statues, the museums. You can go to museums for free. You give a donation if all you can afford is 50 cents, or if you can't afford anything at that moment, but you need to stretch and expand your mind. There are things you can do. So we are not coming from a privileged place, as I have heard from folks who have slid in my DMs like, oh, well, you say this because you can afford it. And it's like, we also, too, we take ourselves out without even looking at the price. I used to say I couldn't afford an assistant. And then when I finally looked to see how much it was going to cost me to get an assistant, I felt like a fool. Why didn't I do this beforehand?
Yeah, that used to happen to me a lot with travel, where I would feel like, oh, it's so expensive to do this or that. Like I remember Europe was like, I've been wanting to go to Europe since I was, I don't know how old, like 6 or 7, because I just have always been really interested in travel. And I remember in my early 20s, I had like a friend that was like, oh, let's go to Europe. And I was like, Europe, like, oh my God, I felt like I needed to make it. Like I need to be like a whole nother level to go to Europe. And it was the craziest thing how it all came together and we figured it out and we ended up going. And like after that, it was like, oh, I can go anywhere. I can do anything. Like it's like just taking the step and doing it. It changes your overall perception of it, because now you're inside the house looking around as opposed to being outside wondering what's inside. It's like, okay, I'm in here. I see what it costs. I see what it took. And it's like, oh, I can do this again and again. And that for me has been my kind of saving grace, is just like taking the little step. Like when it came to self-care, I didn't know how that looked because I didn't grow up seeing any woman in my family practice self-care. I had no idea what self-care looked like. I didn't even know what that meant. It was like, what is self-care? Like, yeah, I care about myself. Like, yeah, I'm here. Right. And it's like, no, it was like something as simple as taking a bubble bath, like randomly, because I just felt like it, or just going for like a walk and just being by myself and just like realizing how important it was for me to just think about doing something and then going to do it. For me, it started with going to eat sushi by myself. That was where self-care started for me in college. I would go to this sushi place across the street from campus, and there was like, they had like a really cool sushi bar, and I would just go by myself, sit there, drink my favorite Japanese beer, eat sushi. And then it was crazy because like all these random people would come up and they'd just be like, hey, are you here by yourself? And I'd be like, yeah. And I'd have the most amazing conversations with strangers. Sometimes they'd end up paying. So that was great. But it was right. It worked out all the time. But I'm just saying it was like something so simple as me feeling like, I want sushi. I'm not going to wait for anyone to go with me. I'm not going to wait until I think I can afford it. I'm just going to go right now and I'm going to feel good. And it literally has become a thing to this day where I just like to go sit and eat by myself. And for me, that is one of my self-care activities. So it definitely doesn't have to be some luxurious thing. I mean, I'm aspiring to 2 times a week at the spa, honey, but that is a goal. Okay. But I just want to just piggyback on what you guys are saying. It's like, it can be something so simple. It's just about doing things that make you feel alive and good and like you matter to yourself. And I think the more you can kind of step into that is the more you start to feel like you can do other things, even within business. It's like, hey, I just went to go eat this sushi because I felt like it. Maybe I can do this other thing too. Like, it's like proving to yourself over and over again.
I love it. And I would say the themes and the practical steps, because I'm hearing common themes, whether it's something more luxurious like spa twice a week, or whether it's something simple like eating, which you're going to do anyway, out at dinner alone, which I love. I love that. Thank you for sharing that experience. And I love hearing the background that you didn't know what that was growing up. I think that's really connecting for the listeners. But what I notice as common practical themes is that you have to like have those conversations with yourself, right? So like you really go through the self-talk, and you have to really build your confidence, and however, whatever shape or form self-care comes out to be, whether it's taking space to write in your journal or meditating or eating, which we're all going to do anyway, but going out solo and doing it. Those are great ways to do self-care, but it doesn't matter what shape or form it morphs into. What matters is that you give yourself the permission, which you don't need. You can just do it with confidence, to be able to integrate some type of a habit, however that looks. And it can take on other iterations and forms as you progress as a human, or you have other opportunities in your life as your life changes, right? Maybe you've got kids, COVID, et cetera, all kinds of reasons why your self-care regimen might change. But what doesn't change is just that voice in your head telling yourself, like, this is part of who I am, and this is going to make me a better person and help me codify my vision as a human and help other people. And I think that's what's important. And for me, that this action steps to gain more confidence include constantly reading and absorbing media from role models, big, meaning Sarah Blakely, or even smaller scale, someone like you guys who I know and I'm inspired by. And I think it's important to support people you connect with. And it's also going to inspire you. So it's the cyclical effect where you inspire each other. And you said that earlier, Danielle, you look at Alecia's stories and you want to do stories too. And you're inspired by her, you like her, know her, trust her. And then you're like, why don't I do this more too? And that's what happens, when you gain confidence and you start participating in that dialogue and then like building up with a confidence, which translates to self-care. So I think there are ways to start small and free.
Yeah. And to kind of elaborate on the whole, like seeing somebody do something, sometimes there's been this idea that if you're copying someone, it's like monkey see, monkey do, you're not original. Or a big thing that I hear a lot is, oh, this market or this is saturated. And it's like, I don't know how many times I've driven down a road and I saw Burger King and a McDonald's on the same street.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And it's like, nobody's like, hey, I'm not like, why would I go? Like, you have options and it's okay to be another option for people. And it's also important for you to get out of your own way when it comes to feeling like when you don't want to allow people to inspire you to do. Because I know I've been there where I'm just like, God, she's going to feel like I'm trying to be like her. She's going to feel like, like that happens to people where you just don't want to seem like you aren't the person inventing this thing. And it's like, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is there. Find your way to roll it. Find what you need to put your wheel on to get down the street. But don't let this idea that you have to be like this second coming of Christ to do things.
I love that. Do you think McDonald's said to their staff, like, oh, Burger King's down the corner, we're not going to open, we're insecure?
Yeah.
No, McDonald's said, like, we own this joint.
Yeah.
Popular, everybody knows our emblem. We are here to serve. That's what McDonald's says. Exactly. And like, if we can employ that McDonald's energy,
exactly.
It really doesn't matter. You just be your own unique self with your own self. Right? McDonald's has the M. You have your own little unique, logo and brand representation, even if you don't have a logo yet. So I think we just need to think more like that.
Yeah. And if anything, look at it as a competitor. Look at it as competition. Look at it as ways to challenge yourself, to find ways to differentiate and to make yourself stand out. Like, don't look at it like, oh, they're already doing it, so I'm not going to do it. It's like, no, they're doing it, but how can I maybe improve on their model? How can I find different ways to market to people in a way that's going to make me seem like I am as unique as I think I am, even though there's a million other people doing it? There's still something about you. And I think that goes full circle into how important it is to step into the fullness of yourself and to be vulnerable, because that is your superpower. You being yourself is you differentiating yourself from everybody else, because there's nobody else like you. So you don't have to come up with some like genius idea as to how to differentiate. You literally just have to be yourself. And it's really hard to do that. So I never want to trivialize that. It's very difficult to feel comfortable enough to do that. But I just want to kind of remind everyone that that is the thing that's going to separate you from everybody else. You already have it.
And you don't even have to think of them as competitors. And me, maybe because I live in this utopian universe in my head where I'm like, no, even if we do the same thing, there is always an opportunity to collaborate. Mm-hmm. And I look at even with what the Slutty Vegan did with, what's that, Shake Shack. They both sell burgers. They literally both sell burgers. But she now has done a collaboration with them to where they're now going to offer her Slutty Vegan burger in their establishment.
Look at that.
It doesn't have to be competition.
Yeah, there's so many options. Collaborate, compete, all that. Yeah, I love that.
So many. You've got both of the C's. You can see it as a competition to where if you are a competitive person and that energizes you,
right,
go for it. Full force, put your armor on, let's go. Or if you prefer to collaborate, like me, again, the whole energy thing, and this happens when you know who you are. I'm not so good at competing because I'm like, it's okay, you win. Like zombie apocalypse, you don't want me on your team because I'm gonna just be like, I can't. He can have me. Just take care of my kid. I can't do this. So for me, I prefer to collaborate. So I'm going to be looking at how can we do some things together? What does it look like for our joint efforts to lead to the ultimate goal? But either way is cool. Go down the bread aisle. It's like 50 million different types of bread. And the potato bread didn't decide that it wasn't going to create the potato bread because you had the wheat bread. It was like, nah, but I'm doing something different. I love a good potato bread. The non-bread didn't be like, oh, there are all these other breads. And I think that's pronounced right. Y'all correct me if not. I know y'all will. They didn't say, we're not going to do this because, our bread is shaped different. There's no place for us in the market. No, there's a butter for every bread. That's why it's so important to first know yourself and get super clear on what type of impact do you want to make? What type of lifestyle do you want to live? And then how do you want to feel? And I know people like, oh, that's so woo woo. You can't base, your entire life on how you want to feel. And I call bullshit. You absolutely can base your entire life on how you want to feel. And you should, because when you feel better, you move differently, you love differently, you operate from a pure heart, from a different space than when you're operating from I got to make this money, got to make this money, got to make this money. First of all, people can read desperation and they're going to run because most times when people are desperate, they do things that are out of character.
Yeah.
So hone into what your purpose is. I want to die empty as fuck. I want to just, when I die, there's nothing else. Because to me, I feel as though the wealthiest place in the world, and this isn't my saying, so quote whoever it is, whoever's saying it is, but I believe in it. The wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard because most people die with their greatest gifts and talents inside of them still. Yep. They don't tap in. They're afraid of what, everyone is going to say. They're afraid that their mom won't understand. My mother didn't understand too when I went to New York, and it has literally been the best decision ever. She called me selfish. And I was like, yeah, I am being selfish and I'm okay with it. I've been unselfish my whole life. I'm about to get real selfish. I'm going to do what works for me. She's like, well, do you think you're being a good mom? Like she questioned, whether or not I was being a mom. And for those who are listening, again, my mother was just concerned. She was scared that I wouldn't do it. So many people had, done I'm going to leave home and didn't make it and all the things, all these, scary things. So she was afraid. And that's fine. You will have people who love you so much. They want to incubate you and shelter you. But staying in your comfort zone means that you'll never grow, which means you will eventually die. First, you'll die energetically. And then once your body is tired of having nothing to pull you, to maintain you, to keep you energized, excitement keeps you alive. Once you get to that point in place, then you die physically, but you've been walking around dead for how many years? That's not it. You can change, make a different decision.
No, for sure. Yeah. And in closing, I know we're keeping you, we don't want to take up your whole day. And in closing, because I know this is something, you've already said so many amazing things and dropped so many gems. What would you feel like is the best advice that you could give to someone wanting to start and embark on their own business and kind of turning that passion project into something profitable?
Yeah, I would say the best steps would be to start small. And it's this interesting concept of wanting to think big, but then needing to start small, right? So I think that what helps is giving yourself credit and permission to take baby steps. And that baby step could mean that you're feeling uncomfortable, but you're meeting new people, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, and those people might be more aligned with the direction, even if you don't have a clear vision, because none of us wake up with a mission and vision having never had started, right? These things progress, right? Yeah. I didn't wake up and say, I want to be a millionaire. I woke up and said, I want to feel important and pay my bills with a little wiggle room, right? That's really I was like, I want more. I didn't know how to quantify it. I didn't know how to define it. That came with time. So I'd say my biggest tip is to take baby steps. And what that looks like could be finding a group of like-minded people, constantly listening to content, media, audiobooks. The library's free. There's a lot of great resources you can get from that. Podcasts are also free. A book a month is a great kind of metric to keep for yourself that's going to keep you focused. So small steps, stay engaged and inspired. And then I would say have a practice of self-care regularly, even more so at the beginning of your journey, because oftentimes it can feel really overwhelming and lonely. And if it does feel overwhelming, take it slow. That's okay. Slow is better than nothing. And if you're feeling like you need more of a community, I don't think there's anything more important than being surrounded by people who are going to inspire and encourage you. So if I had one tip out of all of those, I'm saying starting small, etc. And specifically, I'm an advocate of social media. So I would say starting with social media, like Alechia does, show your face on social media at least, I say at least twice a week in your stories, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, obviously YouTube, because that's video. I'm assuming that you guys aren't starting with that. If you're doing like Instagram or Facebook, definitely you got to show up in some form regularly. And so to be able to do that, I can't speak highly enough about being with people who are like-minded and inspiring, whether that's a coach, a group program, a community, events, whatever it is. I will never stop doing that. It might get harder and more strategic as I progress, and that's my story now, but it's really helped me at every level to be able to find like-minded people. And I think that's really important.
Wow. That's, yes.
I love that. I love that. And I know we have to go because we have definitely kept you way longer than we were supposed to.
It's been great. I've enjoyed chatting with you all. So no worries. It's good.
Thank you. I just have one last thing, and I promise. We talked so much about growth, but along the path, and as we embark on our continued growth, because for me too, whatever doesn't grow dies. So I am in a constant state of how can I grow? What does growth look like? What are some of the things that you should feel we should tell ourselves yes to as we keep embarking on the evolution of our growth? What should we continually ensure that we tell ourselves yes to?
I would say, great question. Say yes to being uncomfortable. Say yes to try anytime you try something new, or would you say new level, new devil, or something like that?
Yeah.
In order for you to grow, it's not going to be fun, and you inevitably have to experience some level of discomfort. So I think it's accepting that the process. For example, like I said, it's a metric of success when someone tells me to be small, when someone says I'm crazy. That means that I'm kind of going in that growth direction. And I think when you're newer and starting this, like I mentioned, I was almost like paralyzed when my administrator told me to stay in my office and look pretty, where now I would say, I get people tell me that stuff all the time, right? So
yeah,
I've grown a thicker skin because I've been able to be less paralyzed from people who don't agree with where I'm going, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that what you need to say yes to yourself is say yes to being uncomfortable, say yes to accepting people that don't agree, whether they're haters or your family members, or rude comments from people who don't mean it, but they don't understand it. Like you said, Alechia, your mom didn't mean it. She didn't understand why you were going to New York. It was the best decision for you, but your mom didn't get it. And that's okay. So in the present state, if we can see those comments as just people, like when you're going in a new direction of growth, that it can be lonely. I think to understand that and really embrace that is going to help. So in embracing saying yes to negativity, to people who disagree is going to help. And then saying yes to developing small routines that turn into habits, such as showing up on social media, thinking through some types of practices of self-care, whether it's writing, reading, eating by yourself, or something of that nature that works for you. And then also saying yes to giving back. I think the best thing you can do is, whether you're giving back your time or money, you're volunteering, or you're giving your time. Like for me, if young entrepreneurs have questions and they say, can I pick your brain or whatever, like I help them. I do everything I can to help people if they have a question, if there's some way I can serve. So I think it's at every level, it's important to say yes to giving back, because it'll come back you, it'll help strengthen you. And every time you strengthen other people, that can be a slippery slope, because I'm not saying you should do free work, but like some way to do some kind of philanthropic effort, you'd have to define what container that looks like for you, is really important. And it'll help inspire you to become a better version of yourself. And it goes full circle, because you're more likely to break through the hatred and people who don't agree with you when you're giving back and you're seeing people who are grateful and appreciative of whether it's your time or money. And I would definitely at the beginning recommend you give your time, because the experience of helping people, whether it's at a food pantry or whether you're donating your time on the phone with somebody, is going to be really rewarding and strengthening for your character.
Oh my God. Yeah, totally. 100%. Thank you so much. Oh, this is awesome. Thank you for all the gems and all the tips and all the things that, it's nice sometimes when you have these conversations and you can like walk away feeling like, okay, that I can do. Like I can do that. Sometimes you hear these things, or you watch podcasts, or you watch videos and TED Talks, and you're just like, I don't even know how do I start? This is like, I have things where I'm like, okay, I can do that I can implement. And that seems like that's actually feasible. So thank you so much for breaking it down and keeping it so simple and feeling like something that you could actually do. We obviously want to keep up with you. We want our audience to keep up with you. Where can we find you? Where can we follow? Where can we, hopefully you're still sharing stories. Where can we listen to that? How can we stay connected with you?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you both for having me on. I truly enjoyed sharing time with you. You're both really inspiring women. And so this pleasure has been mine. As far as social media, my website is Dietitian Boss. I'm on Instagram at Libby Rothschild. My podcast is Dietitian Boss, and my YouTube is called Dietitian Boss. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well at Libby Rothschild. So either Libby Rothschild or Dietitian Boss, and you'll be able to find me. Feel free to reach out, send me a message, and definitely show your face. If you got anything from this conversation, showing up and showing your face on social is definitely one of the most important, simple yet challenging action steps you can take to develop your character and really go to that next level.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Until next time, bye guys.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Triggered AF. Remember, don't be consumed by your triggers. Confront it and then work to release it. Whether you leave us more triggered than you came, or you're feeling like you've been open to a new perspective, our hope is that you've grown. Make sure to share this episode with a friend who's trigger happy and tag us while you're listening. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next week, pull it together, girl.